Hello, I'm Kevin Adams, Executive Director for Waterfall Keepers of North Carolina. Countless people visit the waterfalls in North Carolina, and they have access to vast amounts of information about them. But where did that information come from? How do we know the waterfall exists? How do we know that the fern growing at that waterfall is found in only a few other places in the world? And why does that waterfall even have water on it, instead of being diverted to a hydroelectric facility? We know these things because long before you had to hike shoulder to shoulder to see certain waterfalls, there were men and women all across the state researching, exploring, and protecting them. And there were others whose fortune in life it was to live or work in the waterfall environment. Here are their stories. I am thrilled to welcome the inimitable Bernie Boyer for the first interview in our Oral Histories initiative. Bernie's name is well known in the waterfalling community, but his shy and quiet nature means that many people haven't had a chance to talk with him and hear his stories. I am thrilled that we have that opportunity today to sit down and get to know him better. Welcome, Bernie.
Hey, well, thank you, Kevin. Thanks a lot. I really think this is a great opportunity.
Good. Well, I am excited about hearing everything you have to say. So let's just dive right into it, and how about we start at the beginning? When did you get started with all of this waterfalling, and how did you get started with it?
Well, I probably need to tell you that when I first moved down here, I moved down to South Carolina when I retired, and I was a bass fisherman. So it gets pretty hot down there in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so I had a neighbor that had been there, retired for a while, and he took me to some of the classical waterfalls in South Carolina, such as Kings Creek, and Schoonover and things like that. And I liked it, but I didn't really get into it. But one day he took me up to the horse pasture. And in those days, you could park right alongside the road.
Oh, I remember that.
Go down over
the
drift falls. And so we went down there, and then we went down to Turtleback, and then the awesome Rainbow. And, there was no real trail beyond Rainbow in those days.
Right.
And maybe there was a little one that went down that camping area. But we really thought that was something. So we just kept getting more and more involved, picking up brochures and books and things like that. And so that's really how it started.
And when was this? What year are we talking about?
That was 1993.
1993, okay. You've been at it a while.
Yeah, right.
And you said you moved to South Carolina. Where did you move from, and what did you do before you got there?
Well, we moved from Ohio, and I worked for the Department of Defense up there in research and development. And
one of the three-letter agencies that you can't tell people about.
No, actually, that's not the case, but it was Department of Defense, DoD. Yeah. But I was assigned to the Air Force. We bought this property down here on Lake Pewee in 1984, I think it was. And we built in 1992 and moved in 93, and it was so hot that I thought I'd made a mistake.
Coming from Ohio, I bet,
Right,
yeah.
So, but then as I just started getting more and more involved, and finally a friend of mine showed me a book of Jim Bob Tinsley, and we heard he was going to have a waterfall tour, and we came up and we took that tour of the DuPont waterfalls,
So you met Jim Bob?
We did, and my wife and I started volunteering there. So we were docents there at the museum. And got to meet some interesting people there, too.
I bet. Yeah, I hear that, or heard that Jim Bob was quite a character.
He was, and although, locally he was famous for the waterfall book, but he was actually a country and western singer. And he actually is in the Western Music Hall of Fame. But it just kept expanding from there. And when we moved from South Carolina up to Indian Camp Mountain in North Carolina, up by the Large, by that time I had got this book. Kevin Adams, do you know him?
I'm trying to remember. Give me a minute here.
It was the first book that had really detailed directions. So we started following some of those, and it turned out that even with detailed directions, it was a bushwhack.
Yeah.
And that book, that had the nearby waterfall, that was a treasure trove. Hiking and finding those were really great.
So you've been doing this pretty well continuously since 1993.
But
And
really got into it when we moved up to North Carolina.
right. And how old are you, Bernie? If you don't mind saying.
Well, 85.
85, and as I understand, you're 85 today, right?
Yes. Right.
So happy birthday! Yeah, cool. Very good. 85 years old, and you are still bushwhacking.
Yes, the hikes are getting shorter, but sometimes I might have to go 3 or 4 or 5 times to get to the waterfall that I'm after. And but it's kept me in good physical state, and it's kept me in good mental condition.
Hiking has a tendency to do that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
There's a lot to think about when you're planning the hikes and everything.
So you have to think a lot about where you're going and how to get there and routes and what to take and how to be safe. But when you're actually doing the hiking, sometimes it's just a matter, and I know this from experience, it's just a kind of a boring mental time unless you think about something along the way. Do you have any regimen about that? Do you multitask by deciding what you're having for dinner that night or things like that? What goes on through your mind when you're spending all these hours out in the field?
Well, mainly, I just think about trying to get to where I'm going. And most of my reflections come after I get home and they're downloading my pictures and looking at the hike and everything. So, but I usually have to stay pretty focused, and I'm guilty of not looking at my GPS enough. I make a lot of errors.
Yeah, I think if anybody's being honest, that they'll tell you that happens from time to time. Get just a little bit lost or turned around.
Yep. Yeah, they say, do you ever lose your way? And it's no, never. I know where I am. I just
you just don't know how to get back to where you started from, is that it?
Yeah.
But seriously, have you ever been what you would call in a bad situation as far as being lost and not knowing where you're going?
No, like I said, I've been in the wrong direction, but it's really a good, easy place to hike in this part of the country because there are logging roads.
Right.
And the terrain, is just moderate, I guess. And if you just stop and reflect and you consider that I always have my maps and at least one GPS. I actually have 2 that I carry all the time. And so I just take a minute to find out where I am and go back to where I should have been.
So you mentioned always having your maps. I know a lot of people that in the waterfalling community that hike these days, their map is on their phone, but you still carry the paper maps, the topo maps, right?
I do, but I do use the phone. I have the Gaia, and I have my Garmin GPS unit as well. But I always have a printed map, so I can look at that.
And you said Gaia. What is Gaia for people listening here?
It's a phone app. I don't know what the initials stand for, but I was late getting into that because I always thought it would run my phone down, but it really doesn't. I mean, you can't go out there for 4 days, but if you go out there on a day hike, like I do all the time, there's no problem with running the phone down, and it's really, really, really good.
Does a good job, does it?
It does, yeah. And I'm impressed with it. and it just records all your hikes and keeps them in the cloud or wherever, some server in the world keeps them there, so you can go back and see where you were.
Well, I'm very fortunate that you have let me have a few of your topo maps that you've marked up, and I've made copies of those, and I consider them treasure troves. By the way, they're going to end up being in our archives for our Waterfall Keepers Library. I'm impressed by your attention to detail. You write everything down, you put it all, so nothing is, if you were to go back years later, you don't have to worry about forgetting or anything. And I'm extremely impressed by the accuracy that you put into that. You've over the years learned how to read maps pretty well, the topo maps.
That's one of the first things you have to do. If you're going to go off trail, you must be able to do that.
Yeah.
Back when we started, all we had was paper maps.
That was it, yes.
And those USGS quads were just gold. And so I always tried to point out where I went, and learning to read them, you just had to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, 1993, coming on close to 30 years now.
Yeah.
You've been to a lot of waterfalls.
Yeah.
Any idea? Do you keep count?
Well, I kept count. When I first started, I did only wrote down the ones I went to that were at least 20 feet high.
20 feet.
20 feet. And then I got going and said, well, we're getting to so many of these things. I went to 30, and for 2 years, I was finding like 30 of those a year. So finally I gave up, and when we moved to Georgia then, I just sort of backed off on counting. But,
Yeah.
you know.
It gets hard after a while.
Depending on what the definition of a waterfall is.
So what's your definition of a waterfall?
Well, there is no single definition. I mean, some of the most beautiful waterfalls that we've seen have been, 8, 10, 15 feet.
Right, right.
And then there's a big cataract that is 100 feet. But, it's just no definition. It's just sort of in your mind what you want to follow.
So you're not going to go with Webster's definition of waterfalling over a precipice, huh? So you don't keep count of the waterfalls, but I bet you have an idea of some of your more favorite ones. Some of the discoveries that you've made that are just really, you're like, oh my gosh. Could you tell us about some of those?
Well, yes, but like you said, the some is a better word. If you'd ask about what my favorite one was, you can't do that. There's just so many of them. But I didn't discover it, but Flat Creek is a fabulous waterfall.
Yes.
I had this buddy, John Neal, that hiked with me a lot. And when we rounded that corner and got out of that creek and looked at that hill, we couldn't believe how big that thing was. And so that was a tremendous thing. And on the same creek is Nellie's Falls. Isn't that a nice little falls?
Yes.
That we like. And so that was a couple of them. The one on the Big Bear Wallow. You know where that is, down there along 215?
Yes. Yeah, I know about it because of you.
Can I tell you a story about that?
Well, you can tell me the story about anything. That's why you're here.
Well, when we were building our house on Indian Camp Mountain, we lived in a little cabin, and my landlord was actually the guy who used to own the Davidson River Outfitters. So he fished the North Fork of French Broad Rock. And he took me fishing up there one day. And on the way back, coming around that S-curve there where Big Bear Wallow is, and he pointed out an old logging road. He said, now that logging road goes all the way down to the North Fork. And he said, we use that to go down there and fish. Well, Jim Bob had a picture of, I think, Old Spider, or Big Spice Cove or something.
Spice
like
Cove,
that.
yeah, and there was another one down there too. Can't
Yeah,
remember
so
the
I
name
thought,
of it.
well, boy, I'll just go down that logging road and just cross that bank. So I started down that road, and I could hear this waterfall just right at the beginning. And it kept getting louder, and louder and louder, and this was like November. What in the world's going on? You know, nobody ever said anything about there being a waterfall there, right next to the road.
Right.
And so as I got close here, I could see this thing. It was roaring. And the more closer I got, the bigger it roared. And I thought, it hasn't rained for weeks. And here's this thing roaring. So anyway, I go down and I take some pictures of going down to the river. And when I got home, and I could not figure out why that thing was roaring. And I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, I was going on up 215, and there was that camp, that boys camp up there, Conestoga, or I don't know the name of it. And they had been draining a lake, and that directly feeds into that
I'll
big
be
water.
darned.
So anyway, it's a beautiful little waterfall, and it's right next to the road.
So, but you didn't get any. Did you get any photos of it while it was roaring
Yeah,
like that?
Yeah. Those were my first ones. But of course, when you have so much water, it hides some of the real details
Right.
of the waterfall. So it's just a big blurb.
So you mentioned your buddy John Neal.
Yep.
Now, if I'm remembering correctly, you're not a waterfall namer.
Right.
You like to find the waterfalls and see them and photograph them, but you don't give a hoot about giving a name. But John Neal Falls is, you did name that, and it's the only one that you have that you really felt an interest in naming. Is that correct?
Yeah, John was a really good friend. He would go at the drop of a hat, which is my style. You know, I like to think about things and then decide to go. So John would go, and he was a good hiker, and he moved to Florida, and so I lost a good friend.
Yeah, missed hiking with him. Huh?
Yeah. So now I hike mainly by myself,
Yeah.
which is not a good thing. But I am successful.
Well, John Neal Falls is an appropriate waterfall to choose as a tribute to him because it's a beautiful waterfall. Yeah, sure enough. So tell us about some of your other discoveries.
I don't like to say discovery.
Because somebody's seen it. Some human at some point has seen it, yes.
But I'd say maybe waterfalls that I've counted, you know, or something, I don't know. But that have been off the
That you were the first one to see in the modern waterfalling community.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, nothing comes to mind real well other than Nellie's fall that I like.
Nellie's is a good one. Well, there's one that comes to my mind.
Oh, well, actually Bernie's fall.
Yeah, how about that?
Would you like to hear that story?
I would love to hear that story.
Okay.
And I'm sure everyone else would too.
Well, as you know, we've been looking at these maps for ages, and I was sure there was something there. And so I started looking at these old maps and finding some logging roads, and I started coming in off of 281 up there. And I go a little farther each day, or each time I went hiking. And so I got one time, the last time I got pretty close, and I went by and I could hear it down there, and it was roaring, but I couldn't see any way down there. So I went home and I got in touch with my friend John Neal and asked him if he wanted to go look for this waterfall. And so we got there and we started down the trail, and finally we just went down over the bank, down a wet gully, and we got down there, and here's this wonderful waterfall. Well, okay, so we took some pictures and went on down the creek to see if there's anything else on down the creek and find out. And as we trail crosses or comes very close to the creek up there, John was saying, well, why don't we go down there and see if we can find it going down the creek? And I said, no, I'm too tired. Oh, come on, it can't be that far. And lo and behold, it was, I don't know, 200 yards maybe. Just a walk through the open forest. And drive. So there was a little waterfall on top of Burning Falls that you can't see from the bottom. And so I was messing around trying to get down to take a picture of that little drop. And John was wandering off to the right. And he said, "Hey, there's a trail over here." So all that work, we had to get down there, and here was this trail.
That happens sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And so, but now coming down off of the trail to get down to the base of the falls, that's not the easiest thing in the world, is it?
Yeah, it's steep, and as we going underneath it to get to the other side, that's where the best pictures are.
So you've got to be real careful for that. Careful. Have you ever been hurt when you're out hiking?
I have trouble with my legs every now and then, but no, I haven't fallen. I'm really, 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 really careful.
Well, that's a testament to your abilities and being careful that you've been hiking this long.
That's what you have to learn to do. You have to, if you're going to hike off trail, you need to recognize the limits.
Right.
And live with it. If you can't do it today, do it tomorrow. And if you think there's a chance that you can't, you might get in trouble, don't do it.
Right.
And as you know, as you've advocated, don't go to the top of the waterfall, go to the bottom.
Right.
That's where the pictures are anyway.
Right. Well, now I have to admit, there's been a few photos that I've wanted to make and have made from the top, but I'm always hooked up to ropes when I do it,
Yeah. How about that view of the Flat Creek from across the gorge?
Yeah, that's nice. That's one of my favorite waterfalls too, and I think for a lot of people, it would certainly be in their top 10 list. So, Bernie's Falls, obviously named after you, and a fitting tribute. How do you feel about that? You've never been one to seek the limelight. You've always just kind of stood back in the shadows, even though you've accomplished an amazing amount of stuff. But you have this waterfall named after you.
Well, it's an honor, obviously. But as far as how my feelings are, it's great that my friends think I've contributed enough to the sport, and I like to call it a sport, of waterfalling, that you're willing to name something like that and to give me credit. So it's a friendship, and I appreciate it more than I can say.
Well, you deserve it.
Well, thank you.
For sure.
But I had a lot, you have a lot of help. I have what I call enablers.
Enablers.
And one of the greatest is Rich Stevenson.
Yes. For me too.
And then I have Brenda.
Brenda Wiley?
Wiley, right. Brenda Wiley. And Renee Pattinson.
Mm-hmm.
And they're three real important people.
And they're your hiking buddies.
They are. We don't live very close anymore, so we don't like very often. But every once in a while, they'll send me a message and say, "Hey, what you doing?" And,
so you're down in Georgia now. You're doing most of your waterfalling down there. Do you ever come back to North Carolina these days to do much?
Oh, you should say that. Oh, just last week we had Rich and Brenda and Renee and Mark Inman had me come over, and we did a birthday hike.
Oh.
And so my birthday and Rich's and Mark's are all in September, and the two women's birthdays are belated, but long enough. Anyway, we went to a waterfall that you and I have had on our radar for at least 25 years.
And what waterfall is this?
Well, you rightfully called it Fulfillment Falls.
Oh, yeah.
There.
Yeah.
And it about killed you. If you remember that.
Well, Well, part of the reason that I called it Fulfillment Falls was not just in accomplishing that hike, but that was part of it. I was very sick at the time. That was an accomplishment for me to get there, but also because, as you say, we've had it on our radar for so long. That I marked that on my map when I started working on the first edition of the book, and I knew there was a waterfall there. I just ran out of time to go to it, and for some reason I couldn't make it to it for the second edition either. So when I finally got there, I was like, wow, I'm happy to see this guy.
Well, mine was probably maybe 20 years, so I have to give you credit for finding it 5 or 6 or 10 years earlier.
Well,
Yeah, but it was obvious there was something there.
yeah.
Whether it was covered up or anything like that. And it is just, you talk about favorite waterfalls. I think I may have to put that one on my list.
It is a nice waterfall, yeah. And like you say, obvious it's there. Once you've learned to read topo maps like you have, one like that, when the lines look like does for that one, then you can definitely look at it and say, yeah, there's a waterfall there for sure.
But you know, it's gotten so much easier now with technology. Again, back in the early days, Google Earth was so doggone rough.
Yeah.
You couldn't. They have 2013, I think, they started with the high resolution.
Mm-hmm.
They started taking scans when the leaves are off the tree.
Right.
So you can see this, you can see into the forest, and then LiDAR.
LiDAR technology, yes. That's a game changer there.
And if you haven't checked out the slope map, which is part of that, no doubt. You can tell if there's a waterfall there precisely.
Yeah.
You can tell whether it's steep or whether it's vertical. You're just taking all the fun out of it. Really, at my age, it's made it easier.
Right. It just makes it a little bit easier. But of course, and I'm sure you would agree with this, the fun, it's a two-part deal. There's fun in figuring out a place to go where you think a waterfall is, and then of course there's the fun in hiking to that waterfall, checking it off the list.
Yeah, I want to tell you that the sport has picked up some young people too.
Yes.
And there's a couple of special ones. There's Chris Cockfield.
Mm-hmm. Christopher Cockfield.
Down here, and I don't know where he's based, but he's somewhere in South Carolina, I think. And Mark Oley.
Mm-hmm.
And those two young guys are really willing to share their info, and it made a big impact.
So imagine what stories they're going to be able to tell and the volumes of information they will have accumulated when in 40 or 50 years they're sitting down in the chairs like we are having this conversation.
Two great young guys.
Yeah. So, Bernie, I understand you've had some pretty serious health issues along the way that have affected your ability to hike to waterfalls for periods of time. Is that something that you'd care to discuss?
Well, actually, I think it points out one of the real benefits of hiking. And I had come home one day from looking for one of your waterfalls and had a scheduled stress test. So anyway, they hooked me all up and did all the ultrasound, got ready, and the surgeon came in and said, "We ain't going to do this." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You have a big aneurysm." He said, "You need to see a surgeon right away." Well, it turned out I had a 66 millimeters, which is like tennis ball size, I guess.
Huge.
In the rising aorta. So anyway, I went in and had that taken care of. And believe it or not, as you know, the 5 weeks after that surgery, open chest surgery, cut my aorta out, put in a piece of Daycon, picked up a couple of bypasses. 5 weeks, you and I and the group went to schoolhouse.
Schoolhouse. I remember that. I remember it well.
5 weeks. So I was in good shape, and I was 79 years old.
79. Wow.
So that's a good testament. One of the benefits of hiking.
What would you say are some of the other benefits?
Friendship. You will make friends that you never forget.
Waterfalls have a way of getting into somebody's heart, don't they? And their mind.
Yeah, I think planning these hikes and everything sharpens your mind a little bit. And again, for younger people, I'm sure they can't relate. But as you get older, you get less able to do multitasking things, I guess.
Yeah.
But you do, and it's just part of the way things work out. And you got to keep it active. You got to keep your mind active. And, I think planning the hikes and executing the hikes and coming home and putting them on the website or whatever it's all good when there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a number of people out there now that are working on waterfall challenges to do that, and I hear some of the same kinds of stories from them about it. It's just there's just something about it that it puts some type of well, I'm not sure what it is. Just a purpose in their life at that time, at that period in their life. That's a good thing. What is it about waterfalls you think that are so appealing to people, and that cause you to want to, you hike to one and then you want to hike to another and then you hike to another and the next thing you're hooked? I mean, what is it? I mean, there's all kinds of great stuff around here. We've got mountains and beautiful scenic views and things, but the waterfalls are what people are attracted to so much.
Well, I don't know, Kevin. It's one of those questions I can't answer. It's just that everyone is different, and even if you go back to the same one 10 times, it's different 10 times.
That's true.
I guess it's also not everybody goes. Even though you can't prove that someday. It seems like everybody goes.
Well, certainly not everybody goes to some of the waterfalls that you've been to and go to.
So it's just a satisfaction of taking care of yourself, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I know that feeling because I've people ask me that question all the time too, and I can't answer it either. I was hoping maybe you could, so then I'd have an answer to give them. So, you take pictures when you go, but you are conspicuously absent from all of the Facebook groups out there, the waterfall Facebook groups. I wonder about that, and do you have a place where you show your photos that everybody can see?
Yes, I post on Smug Mug.
Smug Mug, okay.
Yeah, I do post them, and I have like 5 galleries on there, and one is stuff found in the mountains, and boy, there's a lot of that stuff out here. And one is of people, and 2 waterfalls, one in Georgia and one in Carolina. And then my adventures folder has is a sort of a blog of my hike, in which I'll make comments and pictures of the hike. And there's probably 250 of those on there.
Okay.
So I don't put them all in there, but I put the ones I think people would be interested in. I get to maybe 25,000 hits a month on those.
But you don't participate in any of the Facebook groups and stuff, and you don't have your own Facebook page. Is that right?
No, I don't have a Facebook page. I haven't come to terms with that. So as far as the internet goes, it's good and it's bad and it's ugly.
Yeah.
If you're a Clint Eastwood fan, you know where that's from.
Yeah.
It's one of his movies. The good is it's a fabulous. Transfer of information, just wonderful. Communication. The good or the bad part is the misuse of it. like bad information.
Mm-hmm.
If you're addicted to the internet and you don't like what you're doing, you get some really bad information. And the ugliness is, I cannot understand how the people can be nasty. So nasty, so personal. I can understand a difference of opinion, and I can even understand why some people have to comment on everything. Not my generation. My generation, I'm probably what, 4 generations removed from the current one. But I would think that civility should be non-generational. Should be go to one. And I don't see that. And I see the internet allowing that stuff to go on. I ain't gonna change it. You're not gonna change it. Nasty people are not gonna change it. Good people. That's the way it is. So I avoid that
I understand.
because there's so much of it in the Facebook. But I have friends to keep me informed.
So you hear every once in a while when your name comes up.
I do, and
Which is quite often, by the way.
well, like I said, I have some good friends, and made my life really happy.
Well, I think you've been a good friend to them as well. So you mentioned stuff you find in the woods.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about some of this stuff?
Well, I think so. I think people probably don't know, or some people don't know, that all this stuff in this part of the country has been logged over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are there logging roads out there, but there's remnants of logging out there. Everything from school buses to old railroads, you know, and just oddities, things like that are out there still remaining in the woods. And if you consider that you're never more than a mile, 2 miles away from a road,
That's right.
you know, so somebody's been there in a vehicle.
Or at least on a train, logging train.
Logging railroads, yeah, it's very famous in this part of the country. That some of these logging roads and railroad roads, they go across the top of a waterfall. If you're watching a road going through the forest and you see it cross a stream, there might be a waterfall right there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't cross in the middle.
That's good thinking, yeah.
So I found a lot of waterfalls by just following the roads and looking at them.
Yeah. So, have you run across any old like train parts and things like that? I guess a lot of old rails that they didn't pull out.
Old wheels. Of course, there's a lot of old automobiles and trucks and pieces of trucks out there.
Yeah.
And we go down by Lower Bear Water for the Caterpillar tractor that's out there. So anyway, it's fun to know that people have been there.
Have you ever run across any old steels?
I have not run across any really recent ones. I have several. Of course, everybody knows about the old still house falls.
Right.
And, but there are other remnants of, but no operating stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I don't think that would be kind of a dangerous situation if you ran across an operating steel. So thank goodness you have it. Have you ever been in? And now you said that you've never gotten badly hurt, but have you ever been in a situation where you were afraid because you ran across some unseedy characters, maybe?
Well, no, I haven't been. I had the car on my little old road. I've had it in places where I wish I hadn't gone and worried about getting out. And it wasn't dangerous worry. It was it's going to cost me a long hike out of here, and it's going to cost me a fortune to have it towed.
Right.
No, I haven't, Kevin. I really spend a lot of time thinking about not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why I feel okay about hiking by myself.
So you're the quintessential responsible hiker.
Uh,
Does your wife ever go with you?
no, not anymore. When we first started hiking in South Carolina, she would go with us, and I wasn't bushwhacking or anything like that in those days, and she loved it, and we saw many, many, many waterfalls, and but she had some eye surgery,
Oh,
and she got to be afraid of falling and detach her retina, and so she
I
quit
see.
doing it, and so. But that's one advantage of hiking, and to waterfalls. Destination hiking has always been good for me,
Uh-huh.
rather than just hiking down a trail. And you can take your family, and
Right.
so that worked out really well for me.
Yeah. So does she worry about you when you go out hiking by yourself?
Well, she doesn't make a big deal out of it, but she always says, be careful, kind of thing. But that's something else. One of the things that you need to do is let people know where you are or where you're going. I print out a map of where I'm going exactly and give it to my wife. And so she knows where I'm going, and I stay with that. I don't change my itinerary at all.
Okay.
In other words, if something more doesn't work out, I go home.
Okay.
I don't go over to the next gully or whatever it is. I go home. So that's really important.
And what I assume that you carry some type of safety gear, a first aid kit or stuff like that. Could you tell us about this?
Yeah, in addition to that, I carry a personal locator beacon.
Okay.
And a personal locator beacon is a survival rescue device. It's 6 watts. It's not a communicator like the Spot or InReach, I think, is the Garmin
Mm-hmm.
equivalent to Spot. They're like only a half a watt, 600 milliwatts or something like that. So they're communicators. They're not rescue devices.
Now, and when you say communicator, you're talking about like two-way communicator. So some.
There are both two-way and one-way.
Okay.
But
But the one you have, all that does is just tell people
right,
there's a signal there, you need help.
right, and there are good ones, and they are expensive. But they're good for like 7 years. So that
Uh-huh.
if you prorate that over the 7 years, it's probably not too expensive.
Right.
So yes, and then the first aid kit. Oh, you need to have a good first aid kit, and you need to keep it up to date. And oh yeah, you mentioned earlier, asked me about getting hurt,
Uh-huh.
and I said I didn't. One time I did get hurt. It was not big, I didn't do anything horrible, but I carry a saw, and I ripped a big cut along my hand here,
Oh my.
and so I was close to the creek, obviously, and so I washed it off, and I had enough gauze and stuff in my
So you
first
didn't have
aid
to
kit.
rip up your shirt.
Right, yeah, no, that would have been bad, but
So
anyway.
first aid kit. What else?
Well,
Your spot beacon.
no, not my
Not
spot.
spot. That's right. Your personal locator
Locator
beacon.
beacon,
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
right? And water, you always have to have enough water, or carry a purifier.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people use a straw, but again, with day hiking, I carry 2 liters of water, and that's usually enough.
Right.
So, and as far as safety, I carry ropes, carry the little ski ropes. They're really lightweight, and
Mm-hmm.
so if I get in a place where I think I might have trouble getting back up, I use a rope,
Mm-hmm.
and very often that's what you need, just a hand up.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the your outfit, your clothing and stuff. Like in particular, what kind of shoes do you wear when you go out? Because you're doing the bushwhacking, so you need better foot protection than just like sandals or just.
Yeah, I'm a ex-Marine, and I was learned to take care of your feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wear good hiking boots. Right now, I use Lowe's, but there are a number of good hiking boots. But
Mm-hmm.
they're up to the thigh, up the ankle, and so yes, I think you need
Mm-hmm.
good hiking boots rather than low cuts. Although many of my friends wear low cuts,
Right.
and
Right.
they get along just fine.
Well, they got stronger ankles than.
That could be,
Yeah.
yeah. People need to realize that I probably take additional precautions.
So, all right. So we're on this track about safety and danger and protecting yourself and things like that. I'm curious. Have you ever had any encounters with animals, bears and bees and snakes and?
Well, that is also a good thing. Most of the stuff you see on the news is bear encounters, and people are deadly afraid of bears. In this part of the country, we have the black bears, and they're not aggressive. I've seen probably in 25 years, maybe 5 or 10 at the most, and I've only seen the back end of it.
Because they're running from you.
So they've been running away from it.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean that if I got between mama bear and a cub,
Right.
that there may be a different approach taken. But in general, most of the time, bears are not the problem. Snakes, yes, they can be a problem. But again, most of them are visible. A copperhead may hide, but rattlesnakes are usually out in the open.
Yeah, and they're not aggressive either.
And none of those are aggressive. Actually, a copperhead, you got to trap it before it. In other words, step on it or something. Yeah. It tries to get away. So snakes, if you just go around them, let them go. But now, you mentioned bees, yellow jacket.
Those little buggers, yeah,
those little buggers are bad.
Yeah.
And,
so have you been stung a lot?
Some. I wouldn't say a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be sure, but the antidote is the person going through first gets away.
Yeah, he stirs them up. Yeah.
And so people follow him.
So you always take the lead then, is that what you're saying?
I take the cobwebs, down as I go. But yeah, the yellow jackets are the thing. If you're allergic to that thing, you need to carry medication.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not allergic, and if I do get a sting, I take some ibuprofen or something.
So it sounds like you subscribe to the adage that the most dangerous thing that you do when you hike is drive to the trailhead, right?
Boy, that's a fact. From my perspective, there are things out there that will hurt you, but again, know your capabilities, pay attention to your hiking, and a slap in the face from a rhododendron bush is pretty rough.
Yeah. So let's switch gears then. We're talking about nasty stuff that'll get you, and danger and getting hurt and stuff. Let's talk about fun stuff. Do you ever just have fun when you get to these waterfalls and you see this inviting pool and it's the middle of July and you're sweating? Do you ever just jump in and play?
Not me.
Not you.
But Brenda does.
Okay.
No, I understand the people that, these waterfalls have become a playground for a lot of people. But again, if you're out there in the bushes, as opposed to one that's next to the road, I don't do it, but lots of people do.
You get your fun just from being there and just the hiking and stuff.
It sounds probably a little, I don't know, but I consider a waterfall a monument, and doesn't mean I just consider it a monument.
I understand. That's nice. Yeah. Did you ever meet Carlton McNeil?
Yeah.
You did meet him.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hike with him?
No, I never did hike with him. I saw him several times on the trail up in
Panther Town?
Panther Town.
Yeah. Carlton was the unofficial caretaker of Panther Town Valley, and many of the trails that we hike today in Panther Town were created by him and his loppers, cutting down the vegetation.
Carlton McNeil Falls.
Yeah, Carlton Falls, yes. Yeah. He was a character, wasn't he?
Yeah, the last time we saw him was actually just before he retired, and he was picking blueberries. He picked every blueberry in the.
That's what he did when it was blueberry season. He'd take his jugs out and fill them up and then give them to people on the trail.
And I don't know how many people know it, but that Greenland Creek Falls, Carlton called that Cheyenne Falls.
Named it after his dog, yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that was one of those first names that changed.
Did you ever meet Cheyenne?
Yes.
You did?
Okay. Actually, the first time we met Carlton was going down the trail, and here come these dogs bounding down the trail. Carlton was right ahead.
So you've hiked with Jim Bob Tinsley?
Yes.
You've hiked with Carlton McNeil?
Yeah.
Any other notable people that you've had the pleasure of hiking with?
Kevin Adams.
I said notable.
Rich Stevenson.
Okay, we'll give you that one. He's worth noting, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So, no, not really. Well, I hiked with a lot of unknown people that were just terrific.
So, Bernie, one of the reasons that you are so well respected in the waterfalling community is because of your humility. And given that, I want to thank you for taking so much time to sit down with us and tell us some of these stories and tell us a little bit about yourself. On behalf of waterfall keepers and waterfall lovers everywhere, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome, Kevin.
And thank you all for watching.
We hope you enjoyed this interview. North Carolina is blessed not only with spectacular waterfalls, but also a wealth of riches in the people who love waterfalls. We'll continue to seek out these folks and add their stories to our library. Would you like to help us? Please consider becoming a member of Waterfall Keepers of North Carolina, and if you have the time, volunteering to work with us. Thanks so much for watching.